What if everything you knew about the real Israelites was wrong? For centuries, two major Jewish groups, Sephardi and Ashkenazi, have carried the legacy of Israel. But who truly descends from the ancient Israelites? Hidden in history, the Bible, and even DNA, shocking evidence challenges what many believe. Could one group have a stronger claim? Or is the truth more complex than we think? Stay with us as we uncover the forgotten history and reveal the real descendants of biblical Israel. Imagine standing on the golden sands of the ancient land of Canaan, where the sun kisses the earth, and history whispers through the winds. This was the birthplace of the Israelites, a people chosen, guided, and tested. Their story is not just one of faith, but of survival, exile, and an identity that has endured for thousands of years. The Israelites, descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were a people with a divine promise. They thrived in the land of Israel, establishing the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. The stories of King David's conquests, Solomon's wisdom, and the magnificent First Temple built in Jerusalem still echo in history. This was their home, their promised land. But fate had a different plan. The Israelites faced conquests, betrayals, and war. Their unity was shattered, and their homeland became a battlefield. The Assyrians came first, sweeping through the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BCE. Cities burned, families were torn apart, and 10 of the 12 tribes were exiled, disappearing into the pages of history. These lost tribes, where did they go? Do their descendants still walk among us today? Then came the Babylonians in 586 BCE, led by the mighty King Nebuchadnezzar. The great Temple of Solomon, the heart of Jewish faith, was reduced to rubble. Thousands of Israelites were taken as captives to Babylon, walking a trail of tears into exile. Their hearts longed for Jerusalem, their prayers filled with sorrow. But exile did not break them. It shaped them. It forged an identity that could survive beyond borders. The Jewish people were no longer just a nation. They became a diaspora, a scattered people holding on to their faith and traditions no matter where they went. They found themselves in Persia, Egypt, Greece, and later, Rome. Every land they stepped into became a chapter of their survival, a testament to their resilience. Yet, despite their determination to hold on to their identity, time began to weave different stories for them. The Romans, in 70 CE, brought the ultimate devastation. Jerusalem fell once more, the Second Temple was destroyed, and the Jewish people were forced into exile again. This time, it was different. The Jewish world was now truly divided. Some stayed in the Middle East and North Africa, becoming the ancestors of the Sephardi Jews. Others journeyed north into Europe, adapting to new lands, new cultures, and new challenges. These were the ancestors of the Ashkenazi Jews. For centuries, Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews lived apart, developing their own traditions, languages, and customs. But both carried the same question in their hearts. Who are we? Where do we truly belong? A people without a home. A history without an end. Imagine living generation after generation in exile, knowing your ancestors once walked freely in the land promised by God. Imagine hearing stories of Solomon's temple, the prophets, and the lost tribes, but never seeing the land yourself. Both Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews endured persecution, displacement, and struggle. From the Spanish Inquisition to the pogroms of Eastern Europe, their pain became part of their identity. But through it all, one thing remained unshaken: their connection to Israel. Yet with so many centuries of separation, one question looms over history. Do both groups share the same ancient Israelite bloodline? Or does one have a stronger claim to the biblical heritage? The answer is hidden deep in history, genetics, and faith, and the truth may be more surprising than anyone ever imagined. The Israelites, once united under kings and prophets, found themselves scattered, their homeland a distant memory. yet their hearts still beat with the rhythm of ancient Jerusalem. Their prayers still rose like incense toward a city they could no longer call home. But exile did not erase them. It reshaped them, forging two great branches of Jewish identity, Sephardi and Ashkenazi. Each group walked a different path. Each carried the weight of exile on their shoulders. And yet, through the centuries, both held on to a single unbreakable truth. They were still the children of Israel. The journey of the Sephardi Jews took them to lands kissed by the sun: Spain, Portugal, North Africa, and the Middle East. Here, they built thriving communities, blending their ancient traditions with the cultures around them. In Al-Andalus, Muslim Spain, Sephardi Jews experienced a golden age. They became scholars, poets, and philosophers. Names like Maimonides and Ibn Gabirol shone like stars, their wisdom echoing through the centuries. Jewish life flourished under Islamic rule, where knowledge was power and faith was a treasure. In 1492, the unthinkable happened. The Spanish Inquisition declared that Jews must either convert to Christianity or face exile. Families were torn apart. Synagogues fell silent. Thousands of Sephardi Jews were forced onto ships, leaving behind the only home they had ever known. They scattered across the Ottoman Empire, North Africa, and the Middle East, carrying their traditions, their prayers, and their unshaken belief that one day they would return to the land of Israel. They spoke Ladino, a beautiful blend of Hebrew and Spanish. They held onto their melodies, their customs, and their ancient identity. But far away, another group of Jews was facing a different fate, one written in the icy winds of the north. While Sephardi Jews flourished under the Mediterranean sun, another branch of Israel's children wandered into the heart of Europe. They settled in Germany, Poland, and Russia, places where winters were long and survival was an everyday battle. Life was not easy for the Ashkenazi Jews. They were seen as outsiders, forced into ghettos, living under constant threat, yet, in their suffering, they found strength. They built tight-knit communities where faith was their shield and knowledge was their weapon. They spoke Yiddish, a language that blended Hebrew with German and Slavic influences. They studied the Torah and the Talmud with an intensity unmatched by any other people. They created a culture of resilience, where even in the darkest times, they found ways to laugh, to sing, and to keep their traditions alive. From the Crusades to the pogroms, Ashkenazi Jews faced relentless persecution. In Eastern Europe, they were pushed into shtetls, small Jewish villages where poverty was common, but faith remained unshaken. They had no kings, no armies, no land to call their own. Yet, they held on to something greater, their identity as Israelites. And so, across centuries and continents, two great Jewish civilizations emerged, one under the warmth of the Mediterranean, the other in the icy shadows of Europe. Two branches, two histories. But one question still lingers. Which group carries the purest link to the ancient Israelites? The answer is not as simple as it seems. The truth is buried in forgotten texts, ancient migrations, and even in the strands of DNA. And as we uncover this hidden past, one thing becomes clear. The story of the real Israelites is far from over. For centuries, the children of Israel wandered through history, some under the golden skies of Spain and North Africa, others through the frozen lands of Eastern Europe. The Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews each carried the weight of exile, their traditions shaped by different worlds. But despite their differences, they held on to one thing, the unshakable belief that they were the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the true Israelites. Yet, a question lingers in the depths of history, whispered through generations. Who are the real Israelites? Does the answer lie in the ancient scrolls of the Bible? Or is it hidden within the very blood that runs through their veins? The truth is waiting to be uncovered. To understand the true lineage of the Israelites, we must turn to the very book that first told their story, the Bible. The Bible speaks of a people chosen by God, a people bound to Him through an eternal covenant. But it also speaks of exile, of scattering, of a time when the true Israelites would be lost among the nations. One of the most striking prophecies is found in Deuteronomy 28:64. Then the Lord will scatter you among all nations, from one end of the earth to the other. This scattering happened, first with the Assyrian conquest, then the Babylonian exile, and finally, after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, the Jewish people were flung across the earth. But here's the hidden detail many overlook. The Bible also hints at what would happen to their identity. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or counted. And in the place where it was said to them, "You are not my people," it shall be said to them, "You are the sons of the living God." Could this mean that some descendants of the Israelites lost their identity over time? That some who claim to be Israelites today might not have the purest link to the biblical lineage? If the Bible speaks of lost identity, then perhaps history alone cannot answer this question. Perhaps the answer lies deeper, hidden in the very fabric of human existence: DNA. The last century, science has achieved something once thought impossible. It can now trace human ancestry with astonishing accuracy. DNA studies have shattered myths, rewritten history, and, in some cases, confirmed ancient truths long believed to be lost. When scientists began analyzing the genetic makeup of Jewish communities worldwide, what they found was both shocking and revealing: the genetic link between Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews. Despite centuries of separation, DNA studies showed a remarkable truth. Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews share a significant portion of the same genetic markers. Their lineage traces back to the Middle East, linking them to the ancient Israelites. One of the most compelling findings came from research on the Cohen modal haplotype, CMH, a genetic signature found in Jewish priests, Kohanim, traditionally believed to descend from Aaron, the brother of Moses. Studies confirmed that many Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews carry this marker, proving their shared priestly ancestry. This discovery was groundbreaking. It meant that, despite exile, despite persecution, despite everything that had happened over thousands of years, these two groups still carried the blood of the ancient Israelites. But then came a discovery that challenged everything. While Sephardi Jews' Middle Eastern genetic roots are well documented, some researchers turned their focus to the Ashkenazi Jewish population, particularly those from Eastern Europe. A controversial theory emerged: the Khazar hypothesis. The Khazars were a powerful empire in the Caucasus region, modern-day Russia and Ukraine, during the 8th and 9th centuries. Historical records suggest that the Khazars, originally a Turkic people, converted to Judaism and established a thriving Jewish kingdom. Some scholars propose that many Ashkenazi Jews were descendants of these Khazar converts rather than the ancient Israelites. Genetic research has produced conflicting results. Some studies indicate that Ashkenazi Jews do not have significant Khazar ancestry and are genetically linked to the Middle East. Others claim that while the core of Ashkenazi ancestry is Middle Eastern, there is evidence of European and possibly Khazar mixing. It does not erase the Ashkenazi Jewish connection to Israel, but it does suggest that some genetic mixing may have occurred over the centuries. The question remains: does being an Israelite come down to DNA alone, or does faith and tradition matter just as much? Genetic evidence is clear. Both Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews have deep ancestral ties to the ancient Israelites. The blood of Abraham still runs in their veins. But history is not just written in blood. It is also written in faith, in struggle, and in survival. For thousands of years, the Jewish people, both Sephardi and Ashkenazi, have lived with one singular hope: to return to the land of their ancestors, to Israel. If DNA alone determined identity, then history would have forgotten the Israelites long ago. But instead, they survived through exile, persecution, and centuries of wandering, not just because of genetics, but because they never let go of their faith. Sephardi Jews carried the melodies of Jerusalem in their songs. Ashkenazi Jews whispered prayers for Zion in the bitter winters of Eastern Europe. Both groups, despite their different paths, have never stopped calling themselves the children of Israel. So, who are the real Israelites? Perhaps the answer is not in DNA, nor in history books, nor in old debates. Perhaps the answer lies in something much deeper, the unbreakable spirit of a people who, despite everything, still call upon the God of Israel. And that is something no exile, no empire, and no DNA test can ever erase. For centuries, the Jewish people have been bound together by faith, tradition, and an unshakable longing for Israel. The Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews, though separated by geography, have carried the same prayers on their lips, the same sacred texts in their hands, and the same hope in their hearts. But as we peel back the layers of history, unsettling questions begin to surface. Could there be a hidden chapter in the story of the Israelites? Have key details been lost, buried, or even intentionally erased? The search for truth has led scholars, historians, and geneticists to examine controversial theories that challenge mainstream narratives. And among them, one theory has sparked more debate than any other. The Khazar theory is perhaps the most controversial claim about Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry. It suggests that a significant portion of Ashkenazi Jews are not descendants of the ancient Israelites, but rather of the Khazars, a mysterious kingdom that flourished in the Caucasus region between the 7th and 10th centuries. Historical records indicate that the Khazars, a Turkic people, ruled over a vast empire stretching across modern-day Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. In a surprising twist, their rulers and nobility reportedly converted to Judaism around the 8th century. Some scholars believe that when the Khazar Empire collapsed, its Jewish population scattered into Eastern Europe, eventually merging with the local Jewish communities. Could this mean that a significant number of Ashkenazi Jews are not of biblical Israelite descent, but rather the descendants of medieval converts? Modern genetic studies have largely discredited the idea that Ashkenazi Jews are primarily of Khazar origin. DNA research has revealed that the majority of Ashkenazi Jews have a strong genetic link to the Levant, modern Israel, Palestine, and surrounding regions. Their Y chromosome lineage, which traces male ancestry, connects them to the ancient Cohen priestly class, reinforcing their Israelite roots. However, some genetic findings suggest minor Khazar or Central Asian influences in Ashkenazi Jewish DNA. Could this be due to intermarriage over the centuries? Or is it evidence of a larger Khazar migration into the Jewish world? What remains undeniable is that Ashkenazi Jews have fiercely preserved Jewish traditions, Torah teachings, and the longing for Zion, just as their ancestors did. But the Khazar theory is not the only mystery in Jewish history. Another question lingers. What happened to the lost tribes of Israel? The Bible tells of 12 tribes of Israel, descendants of Jacob's 12 sons. But after the Assyrian conquest in 722 BCE, 10 of these tribes vanished from history. They were exiled, scattered among the nations, never to be heard from again. Some researchers believe that these lost Israelites never disappeared. They simply assimilated into other populations, preserving fragments of their heritage. And some of them may have become part of the very Jewish communities we know today, the Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews. Historical evidence suggests that many of the Jewish communities in Spain and Portugal may have included descendants of the lost tribes. Some researchers argue that during ancient times, Israelites fleeing Assyrian and Babylonian invasions could have migrated westward into North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula. Later, during the Spanish Inquisition, when Sephardi Jews were expelled or forced into conversion, some of these long-lost Israelite bloodlines may have vanished into Catholic society. But traces remain. Even today, genetic studies show that a significant number of modern Spaniards and Portuguese people carry Jewish ancestry, even though they no longer identify as Jewish. Could some of them be the long-lost descendants of Israel? Some scholars believe that fragments of the lost tribes of Israel may have also found their way into Eastern European Jewish communities. The idea is based on historical accounts that ancient Israelites migrated northward through Persia, Central Asia, and into the European territories. While there is no definitive genetic proof linking Ashkenazi Jews to the lost tribes, the resilience of Jewish identity across centuries of exile suggests that lost Israelites could have been absorbed into existing Jewish populations rather than disappearing completely. The Khazar theory and the mystery of the lost tribes challenge the traditional narrative of Jewish history. But why do some scholars insist on these alternative theories? For centuries, the Jewish people have been bound together by faith, yet shaped by vastly different experiences. The Sephardi and Ashkenazi communities, despite sharing the same sacred texts, have walked diverging paths through history. But this raises a compelling question. Which group, if any, has preserved the truest essence of ancient Israelite life? To answer this, we must travel beyond genetics and historical migration patterns. We must step into the realm of culture, tradition, and religious practice, because sometimes identity is not just about who you are, but how you live. Both Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews trace their spiritual heritage back to the Torah, the laws of Moses, and the teachings of the Talmud. Yet, the lands they called home for centuries, Spain, North Africa, Eastern Europe, and beyond, left undeniable marks on their religious customs, languages, and ways of worship. These differences were not just surface-level changes. They were reflections of how exile and survival shaped the soul of each community. So, who remained closest to the ancient Israelites? Language of the ancients. One of the strongest ties to ancient Israel is language. The Israelites spoke Hebrew, a sacred tongue through which divine laws were delivered. However, after multiple exiles, Hebrew became primarily a liturgical language, with Jewish communities developing new tongues influenced by their surroundings. But here's what's fascinating. Sephardi Hebrew pronunciation is strikingly closer to Biblical Hebrew than Ashkenazi Hebrew. The rolling R, the emphasis on guttural sounds, and the way Sephardi Jews chant the Torah align more closely with ancient Semitic speech patterns. Could this mean the Sephardi Jews preserved a more authentic linguistic connection to their ancestors? Worship in ancient Israel revolved around the temple in Jerusalem, where priests performed sacrifices, chanted psalms, and led prayers. But after the temple's destruction, Judaism transformed. The focus shifted from sacrifices to prayer, study, and community rituals. Both Sephardi and Ashkenazi religious practices evolved, but in distinct ways. Sephardi Jews retained a mystical, poetic style of prayer, influenced by Kabbalah and the deep traditions of medieval Spain. Their melodies often resembled Middle Eastern chanting, reminiscent of the Levites who once sang in the temple. Ashkenazi Jews developed a more structured, solemn style, influenced by European environments. Their prayers carried the echoes of hardship, exile, and survival in the cold lands of Poland, Russia, and Germany. But one remarkable difference stands out. Sephardi customs often mirror biblical traditions more closely. Sephardi Jews have maintained the tradition of reciting the priestly blessing daily, just as it was performed in the Temple era. Their approach to kosher laws and holiday celebrations aligns more closely with ancient Israelite agricultural cycles. Could this indicate that the Sephardi tradition holds a stronger historical and cultural link to biblical Israel? The approach to Jewish law. Strictness versus fluidity. Another defining contrast between Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews lies in halakha, Jewish law. Ashkenazi Judaism tends to be more stringent, with detailed rabbinic interpretations adding layers of restrictions to religious observance. Sephardi Judaism is generally more flexible, emphasizing rationalism, practicality, and continuity with Middle Eastern traditions. This distinction originates from historical influences. Sephardi Jews were deeply shaped by the Islamic Golden Age, where scholars like Maimonides, Rambam, embraced logic, science, and philosophy alongside Jewish teachings. Ashkenazi Jews lived under Christian rule, where religious dogma and persecution forced them into strict, isolated observance. Some historians argue that Sephardi interpretations resemble early Israelite law, where practicality and communal harmony guided religious life. Does this mean that the Sephardi way is closer to the original Israelite mindset? Or did Ashkenazi resilience and strictness preserve the Jewish spirit in ways that Sephardi Judaism did not? And carried the Jewish identity through centuries of hardship. But when we examine the echoes of ancient Israel, we see patterns. Sephardi customs and pronunciation remain closer to biblical times. Sephardi religious practices retain elements of temple-era rituals. Sephardi legal interpretations reflect the rational, adaptable approach of early Israelites. Yet, Ashkenazi Jews have preserved the Jewish spirit through sheer resilience, surviving the horrors of pogroms, ghettos, and the Holocaust while holding on to their faith. So, which group is the truest link to ancient Israel? Perhaps the answer is both. Sephardi Jews may have preserved the traditions, sounds, and rituals of biblical times, while Ashkenazi Jews may have embodied the struggle and endurance of the Israelites. Because in the end, being an Israelite is not just about tradition. It is about survival, faith, and the unbreakable bond with the land of Israel. And that, both Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews have never forgotten. History is more than just a collection of dates and names. It is a living, breathing force that shapes identity, faith, and belonging. And now, after journeying through the linguistic, cultural, and religious echoes of ancient Israel, we stand before the ultimate question. The answer isn't simple. It isn't just about genetics, traditions, or even religious interpretations. It's about something deeper, something intangible yet undeniable, the unbroken link between a people and their past. But can we truly determine whether Sephardi or Ashkenazi Jews are more authentically connected to the Israelites of the Bible? Let's take a step back and examine what we know. Throughout this journey, we have uncovered striking differences between the Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jewish communities. Sephardi Jews have retained a closer connection to ancient Hebrew pronunciation, biblical customs, and Middle Eastern influences, making their traditions appear more aligned with early Israelite life. Ashkenazi Jews, despite adapting to European cultures, have shown unmatched resilience, preserving their faith even under extreme persecution. But does preserving the past make one group more Israelite than the other? Or is it about endurance, the ability to survive against all odds, just as the Israelites did through slavery, exile, and foreign rule? If so, then both Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews carry the spirit of ancient Israel in different yet equally profound ways. Faith through fire, the test of true Israel. If history has taught us anything, it is this: being an Israelite was never easy. The biblical Israelites were shaped not just by their laws and traditions, but by their struggles. They faced war, famine, and exile. They wandered through deserts, fought for their survival, and clung to their faith even when everything seemed lost. In many ways, Jewish history is a continuation of this biblical struggle. Sephardi Jews endured the flames of the Spanish Inquisition, forced to either flee, convert, or face torture. Ashkenazi Jews suffered through centuries of pogroms, ghettos, and ultimately the Holocaust, where 6 million lives were taken in an attempt to erase their very existence. Just like the Israelites of old, they refused to disappear. They carried their traditions, their faith, and their unshakable connection to the land of Israel, even when the world tried to break them. So, if being a true Israelite means enduring every trial and still standing, then both Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews have passed that test. A divided identity or a shared destiny? For centuries, the Jewish people have asked themselves, who holds the true essence of Israelite identity? Who has the strongest claim to the legacy of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? But perhaps this question misses the point. The survival of the Jewish people has never relied on one tradition, one language, or one culture. It has always been about unity in diversity. Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews may have walked separate paths, but their destination has always been the same: to preserve their faith and their connection to Israel. And when the modern state of Israel was founded in 1948, Both communities returned to their ancestral homeland, not as rivals, but as one people. The answer is not found in DNA or historical arguments. It is found in the heart of every Jew who still prays facing Jerusalem, who still keeps the Sabbath, who still remembers the struggles of their ancestors. Being an Israelite is not about where you came from, but what you carry with you. The Torah, passed from generation to generation. The unbreakable faith, despite every hardship. The love for Israel, the land promised to their forefathers. Whether Sephardi or Ashkenazi, whether speaking Ladino or Yiddish, whether chanting in a Spanish Moroccan melody or an Eastern European tune, the real Israelites are those who never forgot where they came from. And that, perhaps, is the greatest truth of all. For centuries, the Jewish people have been scattered, divided by geography, language, and culture. But one thing has never changed: their connection to Israel. Whether Sephardi or Ashkenazi, whether speaking Ladino or Yiddish, whether shaped by the deserts of Spain or the cold winters of Poland, their identity has remained unshaken. But after everything we've explored, the languages, the traditions, the hardships, and the faith, one final question remains. Is it bloodline? Is it the DNA that traces back to the ancient tribes of Israel? Or is it faith and tradition, the unbroken chain of prayers, rituals, and belief that has lasted for over 3,000 years? This is a question that does not have one simple answer. But one thing is certain: the true Israelites are those who never forgot where they came from. A legacy. Carved in fire and faith, history has tested the Jewish people like no other nation. They have been conquered, exiled, and persecuted. They have lived under the rule of pharaohs, emperors, and dictators. And yet, they are still here. Because being an Israelite is not just about lineage. It is about survival. It is about carrying the Torah in your heart, about whispering ancient prayers in the darkest of times, about holding on to a faith that has outlived kingdoms and empires. When Sephardi Jews were expelled from Spain, they carried their Torah scrolls, their traditions, their songs to new lands. When Ashkenazi Jews faced the horrors of pogroms and the Holocaust, they did not let their faith die. They rebuilt, they prayed, they continued. If the true test of being an Israelite is never giving up, then the Jewish people have passed that test 1,000 times over. For too long, the Jewish world has debated who is more connected to the Israelites of the Bible. But the truth is, this question is not about Sephardi or Ashkenazi. It is about something much greater. It is about a people who have survived against all odds. A people who have carried the name of Israel across centuries, through deserts and oceans, through exile and return. A people who, despite their differences, still stand as one when it matters most. Because in the end, Israel is not just a place. It is a people. It is a promise. It is a destiny. Does bloodline define identity? Or is faith and tradition what truly matters?